Hello, everybody. This is the video and live streaming show. I'm John Lacey. Thank you for joining me today. Normally, I'm joined by Sam Proof, and I'm hoping that he'll be with us shortly, but he seems to be slightly held up. But that's fine. Let's get started. So obviously, today we're going out to a number of different places live. So if you are watching live, please let me know in the chat where you're coming to me from. I'd love to hear from you. Today, we're talking all about video opportunities for audio podcasters. So, I've got to I've got to mention this. I've got to get the elephant in the room out of the way first. So sometimes when I talk to people as a video person, they're deeply suspicious of me, because they're audio podcasts, and a lot of people have preferences. They love one or the other. And to be honest, I love podcasts too. I listen to podcasts voraciously. I listen to 3 or 4 hours worth each and every single day. So I'm one of your biggest fans. What I really want to talk to you today about, though, is are there opportunities to utilize video in such a way as to, uh, you know, extend your message, build some awareness, and maybe get more listeners in the process. And you don't necessarily need to take an audio podcast and turn it into a video show, although that's certainly an option, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there are sort of other opportunities to sort of let people know where you are and what you're actually talking about. So those are really important things to keep in mind. So we'll be talking about that all today. So if you're watching live on any of the various platforms that we're going out to live, please let me know in the chat where you're coming from. I'd love to hear if you're actually a video creator or an audio podcaster, or maybe you do a little bit of both. But those are the things that we're going to be looking at today. So you may well ask, why might I be interested in exploring video if I'm strictly an audio person? And, obviously, audio is wonderful. We love audio. I love audio podcasts in particular. I've said that already. But there are different platforms and they do prioritize different things. And they can be useful in terms of actually building some awareness and getting your message out and sharing that with a larger audience, and perhaps even sort of, extending your own audience and bringing them into the fold. So those are some of the things that you might like to keep in mind. And again, I don't like to be dogmatic about any of this stuff. So these are only suggestions. Don't feel you have to do things. Be very wary of people that tell you that there's only one way to do something, because it's really not true. It's certainly not true in terms of the technology. We have all kinds of choices and options out there. So you really need to think about what actually works for you. So let's think about some of the things that you may already have. So we talk a lot on this show about actually building a content library and repurposing your existing content. So it's really worthwhile to think about what are the assets that you already have. And these could be things like, audio. If you've got an audio podcast, you've definitely got some audio recorded. It could be things like logos and colors, text, particular fonts that you associate with your brands and your podcast. You could actually have some images or some video ready to go. And I guess one of the things that I would like to let people know is that you don't actually have to be on camera to be on video these days. There are ways of actually doing things. Sam's just letting me know in the chat that he's having some technical difficulties, but he will be here shortly. Yep, so that's fine. We'll get stuck into that in a moment. But okay, so getting back to my original point, with the tools that we have these days, you don't necessarily have to be on camera to be on video. And I mean this for live streaming, but also for recorded video. So if you don't want to be on camera for whatever reason, a lot of people have concerns about being on camera and fears of being on camera. There are other things that you can do. One of the things that I like to promote is actually the use of OBS Studio and the OBS Studio virtual camera. So you can set up a scene and you can use that scene wherever you might use a traditional web camera option. So that's another thing that you might like to consider. But that said, if you are feeling brave enough to actually do some video, it's worthwhile recording whatever you've got. And it doesn't mean that you have to use that video, but it sort of adds to the creative possibilities. If you've got it, you could potentially use it, but you don't have to. So again, I don't try to I try not to be too dogmatic and too prescriptive about these sorts of things. But I really just want to make you aware of the possibilities. And that could actually be part of, you could be doing it live, you could be pre-recording things. Um, there are so many options out there, and again, I don't want to overwhelm you with the options. I want to sort of gently introduce you to some of those, get you to start thinking critically about those, and think about what might actually make some sense today. All right. So this is the video and live streaming show. I'm John Lacey, and I'm going to be joined by Sam in just a moment. He's just putting the final touches on a few things. But today we are talking all about video opportunities for uh, for audio podcasters. And I'm gonna bring you in, Sam. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Hey, hopefully I'm okay. I have to go to the backup computer. The PC is just not playing fair. Sorry, gang.
And I guess that's the joy of live. Like anything can happen. So that's fine. You good to go, or do you want me to take off the screen and you can set some things up?
If this sounds okay to you, then that's as good as it's going to get unless the PC magically turns on when I do this. Nah, I'll keep going. But yeah, just
Okay.
go like this.
All right, no worries. Okay, so welcome, Sam. So I was going to ask you how you were, but I get the sense you're probably pretty frustrated at this point in time.
A little bit, yeah. Anyway, no, I'm fine. I am also, this is coupled with I'm like totally in the midst of a cold or something, so it's super
Hmm.
exciting. Good times. How's everything with you?
Um, Better than it sounds like they are with you. Anyway, so I mean, I've had a busy week, but it's been a fine week. There's been
Yeah.
no great problems or dramas. It's so funny that you join us right now because I was literally going to talk about things that happen behind the scenes. And sometimes it's a good opportunity to let people know about how the sausage is made and
Oh,
other
man.
vegan inappropriate
Yeah.
metaphors. But like one of the things that I say, if you bring people into the fold, you give them some sense of what actually happens in the back end. They feel part of the process. And I must admit, Nathan is asking if this is a rerun.
No,
It's definitely
not
not
a
a
rerun.
rerun. We're totally live, so we can acknowledge that you're here. Hi, Nathan. Thanks for joining us. Um, so I guess, things certainly in the live streaming world, things will go wrong. And I think there's no shame in sort of being transparent about that and letting people know. And the thing I like to tell everybody is that some of those outtakes, some of those mistakes can be quite hilarious. And they show that you're human and relatable. So I encourage you to show those. Some weeks ago, I did post some of our outtakes. Occasionally we'll record a promo for the next show, and Sam just completely tripped over his words, and then my camera stopped working. So it was hilarious on all kinds of fronts. So I sort of packaged that up and shared it out on YouTube Shorts and TikTok and a few other places. All
That's the
right.
one and only time that's ever happened.
Yes.
Oh, professional.
You don't want to look too professional, Sam. You got to
Yeah.
show that you're human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess in some ways, some of the streams in particular, Sam, that you do, some of them are quite orchestrated. Like I guess the Super Bowl, which is a vaguely football related events that you do for Cute Avalanche,
Inspired.
the
Big
kitten
football
camera.
inspired. Yes. Yeah.
But a lot of them seem to be much less structured. So I guess what is your approach in terms of showing people behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on what your intentions are and your goals are. For the most part, I am not concerned to be like, all right, we're gonna look around and do some stuff and like, really just make fun of this. And like, mistakes happen. That's why it's live. If we wanted something that was pristine, we would go through post and we would do it all, 20 times over until we had the perfect take. I had a job once where we were doing a live stream. We were doing like a game live stream, and it wasn't immediately amazing, and we were struggling to do. I don't even know what. Something wasn't working right. Like some camera wasn't coming on, or sound wasn't broadcasting. And this guy who was kind of the manager at the office just lost his mind about it. And I was like, it's Twitch. Nobody cares. Like, they would be concerned if it didn't have errors.
And as much as we're talking about, going with the flow a little bit, I must admit your audio isn't great for me. I can't always make out exactly what you're saying. So I
Let me
might
see
give
if
you a
I
couple
can
of minutes
patch in
to.
the. Yeah, let me see if I can
Yeah, actually,
swap.
moving forward,
I'll be right back.
seems to help. Okay, no worries.
I'll be right.
We'll talk to Sam in a little bit, but let's keep going with the content today. So obviously, we're talking about video opportunities for audio podcasters. Um, one of the big ones, and again, you may not want to do this for every episode, but especially if you have a special event, this can be quite a useful thing. So there is the potential to actually do a live taping with a virtual audience. So you could use any of the streaming platforms. We've got things like StreamYard and Restream and Ecamm Live and some sort of more podcast specific things like Riverside, those kinds of platforms. That not only can you have a conversation and record some audio and some video, but you can also invite other people to join you, either on a social platform or within the particular platform that they're in. So that's another way. And again, you might, if you're looking to start trying some of these things out for the very first time, it's probably a good idea to actually go and try them out with a small sympathetic audience. Get some of your friends together and just try them out and see how they go. And again, don't try to do too much all at once. So keep that in mind. But certainly that is another way of doing things. And again, um, actually, Sam, if you can just let me, I'll open the private chat. If you let me know when you're ready, I'll bring you back in. So this is the video and live streaming show, and he's giving me the thumbs up. So I'm going to take that as yes, he's good to go.
How is this audio?
It's a little bit better. Yeah, that's great. Thank
Just
you.
a little bit.
Yep.
I was hoping it would be a lot bit better, but okay.
Well, I mean, it's clearer. Yes, yeah.
Good.
So I mean, I can actually hear you now, so that's awesome. Okay, so again, we've got some people saying hi in the chat. So hi, and thank you for joining us. We are going out live to all the various places. So again, if you are watching live, let us know in the chat where you're coming from. And today, we're talking all about video opportunities for audio podcasters. And Sam, now that you're actually with us after some news, I guess one of the points to make was that I don't think everybody needs to have a video show necessarily. And there are some people that are pushing this really, really hard. And to be honest, like if you're the content creator, if you don't have a boss or a client telling you what you have to do, then you get to choose what works for you and what you're happy with. But that said, there are opportunities to sort of repurpose some of the content you're creating, thinking about extending that audience a little bit, building some awareness. I guess one of the things that I've noticed is that there are people that will happily watch podcast clips on TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Facebook and wherever else, and they actually really enjoy those smaller segments, but they don't necessarily become subscribers or listeners to the podcast in full. But I think that in itself is a really good sort of brand building exercise, because it half of the battle, I'm sure, is just making sure that people are aware of who you are, what your expertise is, and what you're actually doing in the world. Not everything you create is going to be for everybody, but if they don't know it exists, that's a problem. So I'm hoping that we can sort of encourage some people to maybe take some gentle steps into video as a way of supplementing and complementing what they do with audio podcasts.
Yeah, I think each platform has its own demands and it has its own audience and like what they're willing to watch on that particular platform. I think it's very different. We often talk about the different vertical platforms, and even within that, it's not just as long as it's vertical, it's good to go. I think your TikTok people are looking for instantaneous sound bites, and your Instagram people are looking for higher quality and longer format and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to doing a podcast, it might not work live. And that's something you need to know, you need to explore within your own niche and your own product and all of that. So you should focus on what it is the podcast really is first and foremost. Like, why is this a podcast instead of X, Y, and Z? And then once you know that that's what it is, then you can see, how do I repurpose it in these other things? Can I turn this podcast into a live stream? And how would that work? Because I think often I've seen people go, well, I'll just live stream taping the podcast. But the point of a live stream, and this is the thing that I always come back to, is it is instantaneous interaction with your audience. And if you're not utilizing that within the podcast effectively, there is no reason to be live streaming it. Not to crap on anyone's dreams, just focus on the thing that it is. So, you know, find the ways that you can use that live stream to aid in your podcast. Find the ways to format the podcast to make it make sense for the live stream simultaneously.
Sure, and I think it's important to consider philosophically the difference between different content types and formats. But just want to say hi to Zita, who's watching on LinkedIn from Central Connecticut. Thank you so much for joining us today. I guess to your point, that's absolutely true. The joy of live streaming is that interaction. So, and again, I'm sure I've said this more than once on this show, but especially if you're live streaming with the expectation of repurposing, you do have to sort of have moments where you acknowledge the audience and you talk to them directly, but you do also have to have little moments where you sort of ignore them for a moment and cover those topics. And I guess if you were to do that live taping, you know, you might want to think about having different segments where you interact with the audience specifically, and then times where you really focus on those. And then you kind of have to make some calls about, you know, what are you editing out and what are you leaving in?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly stated. Yeah, and you want to make that clear from the top of the show. You probably, you know, if you are going to have a wide berth of sort of like, this is just going to be us talking and then we'll address the chat, like it's going to be 20 minutes, you probably want to have a pre-show like chat with the, you know, the viewing audience to be like, hey guys, what's going on? This is what we're talking about this week. Once we get started, we'll collect questions, and 20 minutes in, we're going to go over those questions. You know, just whatever it is, whatever the format is, make sure that's out there. If you know, if it works out for the repurposing of content and it's not going to get in the way, put something on the screen that says, you know, a thing like that, or pin a message if you're doing it on Twitch, or have a timed message from a chat bot that basically restates that like every 5 minutes or so. But yeah, having that format and then making sure that that is clear to your audience so they don't feel neglected, you know, is important.
Absolutely. So I guess, and again, I'm conscious of the fact that some of the people that joined me at the top of the show might have heard some of this already, but I think it's worth exploring again now that Sam is with us. One of the points I was making earlier was basically that you don't necessarily need to be on camera to be on video with today's tools. So, you know, if most of us have some hang-ups about being on camera, and I'm going to just put my hand up and say that's me as well. I actually get nervous before even this show. But I kind of believe that the best way of dealing with that is just a bit of exposure therapy. And that's why I keep showing up and I keep doing this. And that's probably what I would recommend to most people. But if you're like, if it's just not of interest to you at all, you don't have to. And one of the, I mean, there are all kinds of ways of doing different things, but one of the things that I'm quite fond of is the ability in OBS Studio to set up a scene. And, you know, that scene could include your web camera or it could not. And you can essentially use that with the virtual camera feature to just show that wherever you're going live. So that could be you on camera. That could just be some static artwork from your podcast. So there are ways of doing things. And I guess, you know, if that is the hang up, you can try and push beyond it, but you know, it's probably better just to get started with the comfort level that you're at. And you know, if you don't want to be on camera, you don't have to be on camera.
Yeah, and there's so many options now for like sort of virtual avatars to take your place, so that it's not just a static image, but you actually do have a human-esque, you know, representation. You know, and you don't have to worry about it being ready to go. It's virtual. It's like, you know, VTuber, or I'm sure there's months before we have like an AI version of that available as well. But yeah, you don't have to be on camera.
And especially if you know, maybe the podcast that you're doing is particularly mysterious, like you can actually set up just a video mask, so you're just a black shadowy figure in the middle of a white frame. Like
Yeah,
there are all kinds of things that you could do in terms of the
sure.
creative elements. So
Yeah,
it's probably more about the themes and the sensibilities of your particular show than any particular technology. But I guess, you know, just don't get too hang up on the technology.
yeah.
So we've spoken, you know, a little bit about live taping with a virtual audience. I guess another opportunity that I want to talk to people about is the idea of having a listening party. So
Mm.
part of the joy of an audio podcast is that I can download and listen whenever I want to. But that said, if you do have a core audience of super fans that you can get together and actually listen at the same time, there are a number of different ways that you can do this. So one of them would be to actually have some sort of live stream, and again, maybe you introduce the episode live. Again, you may or may not want to be on camera. That's entirely up to you. You play the episode. Maybe you sort of have a bit of a chat about the episode afterwards. And you can do that in sort of a live streaming sense. But you can also, you can upload the podcast as a video, like in YouTube, and have a premiere. So if people really are just clamoring for your content, and you know, you tell everybody that's going out on Saturday 9:30 a.m., they can hit a button to be notified of
Yeah,
that. But also they can chat in real time with other people that are also listening. So that is
yeah,
really cool.
yeah.
I
I
guess,
think the
yeah, go
sorry.
Sam.
I think listening parties are just a great sort of perk, and you know, depending on what you're doing and what your audience is like, you could use that as a, you know, like a Patreon perk or something of that nature. So it's like an exclusive listening party, and you know, you could hold that on, like you said, a YouTube premiere or a private Discord channel, or you could just put it out there to wherever.
And I guess the other thing, and a lot of those, you know, once you've done them, they will stay recorded. But one other feature, just because I'm kind of a LinkedIn person,
Yeah,
LinkedIn has these LinkedIn audio events, and I haven't actually done this, but I'm sort of conscious of the fact that with my Rode Procaster. Rodecaster Pro, I should say,
yeah,
which is basically a little mixing board with sound buttons, a soundboard on it, essentially. I could literally have one of those events. I could load up an entire episode of an audio podcast onto a button. I could introduce it. I could hit the button, and away we go. And I think, you know, I wasn't going to talk about this until later, but I think it makes sense to address this right now. Is that, you know, you've spent a lot of time and energy on your podcast. You want to share it and get as much interaction as you possibly can. So, what I think it's important to think outside of the box. Again, we don't want to give you a million things to think about, or, you know, a should to do list. But I
yeah.
mean, if there are some of these things that jump out at you, I'd highly encourage you to try them. And speaking of LinkedIn, Garen Bellini is watching on LinkedIn.
Hey,
Saying
Garrett,
hello to everyone.
welcome
Garen
back.
Bellini from Micro Studio. When it's time to go, you've got to grab your Micro Studio. He's got all the live streaming equipment in a little bag that you can sort of take with you on the road and stream from anywhere, really.
Nice.
All right. So I guess, you know, before we move on, do you have any other ideas in terms of the listening party, or do you think we've basically covered that?
Um, yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. No worries, just checking.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the video and live streaming show. We're going out live to all various places. My name's John Lacey, and I'm joined, as always, by Sam Proof. Today, we're talking all about video opportunities for audio podcasters. And I want to talk a little bit now about actually repurposing content. So we have sort of alluded to this a little bit already, but you know, and it's probably the perfect segue from that thing I said earlier about, you know, you've spent time and energy and blood and tears and sweats putting this thing together, so you want to make sure it has as long as a life, as long a shelf life as possible. So, you know, I guess the obvious one for us, because we talk about it all the time, is actually those short clips, those vertical videos
Mhm.
that are so popular in the video world right now. So we've got things like TikTok, we've got YouTube Shorts, and we've got Instagram Reels. I'm sure they'll be popping up in other places as well as time goes by. But Sam, how do you think we should approach that kind of short form content?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of ways to use that to promote a podcast before and after the fact. So you can use that if you're doing a live stream to drive traffic and be like, this is where, you know, we're live Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But, you know, obviously you want to give more context. You want to give them something to chew on. I would always try and add some sort of question like that we would talk about on the show. So they're going to leave a comment and you use that as content in the show itself. Be like, we posted this on Instagram Reels and 20 people said this. Like, do a poll, something like that. And then after the fact, there's just so many things you can do, like John did with the outtake clip. That's perfect. Or just to push traffic to, listen to the episode itself by being like, here's an interesting thing we talked about, just a soundbite. Getting those sound bites, I think, is a good move.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I try to do for this show is that once we've done it, I take it into my editing software and I like to have at least 4 clips that I share that following week on social media in all the various places. In a perfect world, I would like to do more, but it's time consuming. There are other things going on in my life. But it is certainly a great opportunity. And, whether you've actually got a clip, as you say, it could be, something you record before the show goes live, something we're soliciting some feedback from the audience ahead of that show to sort of give them some investment in how that plays out, and just to know what people are interested in is really, really awesome too. So we'll talk about that more in a second. I just want to say hi to Joe Serrano, who's
Joe.
wishing us a particular type of Friday, which I get the Freaky Friday reference. I don't quite get the other one.
Right.
You might need to explain that to me in the comments. But it's great that you're joining us. Thank you for being
Welcome
here.
Back.
We really appreciate that. So again, today we're talking about video opportunities for audio podcasts. And I guess, creating short form video is its own art form in some ways. And we've spoken about it quite a lot lately. So you can go into the archives and check that out. But today I really wanted to talk about actually, one approach to creating audio and sort of short clips. So in just a second. And in particular, there are obviously a lot of tools out there that you can use, a lot of paid tools out there. I'm trying to explore an option that maybe is a little bit cheaper, a little bit free. Might require a little bit more effort up front to actually get started, but once you've set these things in action, it will be very easy to sort of come in and tweak these things. So I'm just going to play a short video, and once it finishes, we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so that was a little bit of a video, sort of exploring how you might set up a
Yeah.
scene in OBS Studio with the waveform visualizer to create an audiogram. And I guess the thing, and I've got a couple of images here I'll try and share. I must admit, Restream is telling me my connection is not great, so I'm gonna try
Your
and
audio
hang
is
in there.
good, but your video is frozen.
Okay.
Um,
I'll just bring that graphic over. So essentially, and I hope to make a longer video explaining this in more detail. I just didn't have time
yeah.
this week. But essentially, this is OBS Studio. This is a piece of software that's close to both our hearts. And essentially, what I'm able to do here with the waveform visualizer is create that waveform. And there are actually a number of different settings within that plugin, so you can change how that actually displays. In this image that I've got up on the screen here, we've actually got sort of the Atom vertical plugin as well. So that lets you set up vertical and horizontal scenes. So essentially, where I was going with all of this is basically that we would have the ability to actually, create a horizontal video version and a vertical video version very, very quickly. And even
Yeah.
though it is a little bit of setup to get this set up in the first place, once you do that, you could go in and change the artwork and the audio file, and you could really reproduce these really, really easily. So again, I'm hoping to explore this a little bit further in the coming weeks. But I guess the other thing too, and again, I was going to try and demonstrate this. I don't think I will, given the state of my internet connection at the moment, but let's just talk about it. I guess the other thing is that we want to see in terms of an audiogram is actually some captions. So
Yes.
again, CapCut is a completely free piece of software. It's owned by the people that own TikTok. And you can auto-generate those captions. It is still a good idea to go in and manually correct them because it won't get every word correct. And you really want your audience to understand what you're talking about. So you can do that. You can change how they appear on screen. This is in some ways, this is quite a trivial example, but I just wanted to let people know that there are ways of doing this. And I guess the other thing too is if you're not interested in having the waveform as part of this video, you can actually skip the OBS stuff and just combine some assets in CapCut and do this really easily. Again, if you were in a position where you actually had some pre-recorded video, you could add that in there as well. There are all kinds of creative possibilities, but we just really wanted to underscore the point that you can get started quite easily and quite inexpensively too.
Yeah, and I think this is really great for converting audio podcasts into VODs in a quick clip. You could do the same thing. Obviously, CapCut is for when you're turning it into a video. You could do the same thing with a live stream using something like pixelchat.tv for like live closed captioning. But again, it's not going to be perfect all the time. In fact, it's not going to be perfect. It's about 75% perfect, depending on how clear you talk. But yes, you could do the same setup live or as video.
Sure. So, I guess that's the thing. Like a lot of the auto-generated captions aren't going to be perfect, but they are a time saver. Like they'll help you get started quickly, and that way you can actually go in and just correct the mistakes. So I mean that's sort of another thing that I wanted to sort of unpack a little bit. So again, we keep mentioning the vertical plugin because it is so powerful, but it is the Atom vertical plugin. Again, I was able to record the horizontal and vertical version of one of those clips, and essentially I just bring them into CapCut. I cut off the beginning and the ends because I've left a little bit of extra space there, and then I can add the captions, and I'm good to go. All right. So this is the video and live streaming show. Apologies for my internet connection. It is not playing particularly nicely today, but I'm trying to hang on. So Sam, I guess, is there anything else that maybe you would like us to think about in terms of, either sharing the creation of the podcast or, promoting the podcast afterwards or beforehand that we haven't sort of looked at already?
Oh, geez. Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about promotion and all of that. Obviously, we talked more on the vertical video side of promoting and post promoting your show. So there's obviously a world of other things you can be doing with social media to promote your show. Um, and using that technique of putting the audiogram on to like archive the shows is great. And then you can point that to the RSS feed or, whichever home base you want to call for, whatever server or service or podcast you want to call home. Use that to point to there. But you can also then take that audiogram and remix it on your YouTube so that you have shorts going back to that. You could do this ad nauseum, like 100 things to point to one thing, basically. And beyond that, um, yeah, well, we talked about formatting the show in specific ways. I think obviously every show is different and has different needs, but you do want to make sure that if you're live streaming, you're utilizing your audience for show content at some point or for additional content. Maybe it is something where you do that, like that listen, the live listen, the watch party kind of thing. And then at the end, assuming you have a topic that's really interesting to your chat, you can do live questions and answers. You can then use those things to make follow-up content, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, I think without having a specific thing to break down, there's an endless amount of stuff that can be done.
Sure. And I guess, that's the thing. There are a lot of tools out there that you could use. And I think if you're like me, if you're a bit of a procrastinator, if I can use that word, it's really tempting to go out and want to do the research on a billion tools before you commit to one. And to be honest, I would find something that's cheap and easy and just try it out. You don't have to commit to something forever. And again, a lot of the ideas that we've talked about today, I think are really worth trying out for special events. So if you have a 50th episode, maybe that's the one you want to try and do live, and bring people in and really celebrate it. Just incidentally, Joe has followed up with some comments about the Irie, so that it's basically a Jamaican expression for all good, all right. So, I mean, technical considerations aside, I think it's been pretty good so far.
Right.
It is Saturday here in Australia due to the wonders of time zones and me being in the future and such. But we're having a good time. So we are sort of hanging out. We're talking all about video opportunities for audio podcasters today. We have had some technical issues, but thank you for hanging around with us as we work through them. We do appreciate it. So I guess one thing that I guess we haven't spoken about is YouTube in particular, and we did mention this, I think, last week actually. That YouTube is making a bit of a play for audio podcasts, and that certain audio podcasts will be available in YouTube Music at some point moving forward. There is the ability to, if you have it, and again, I don't think it's for everybody, and I don't think it's for everywhere at the moment, but essentially what they're encouraging you to do is actually create a playlist of the related podcast episodes, and you can actually make that playlist. You can mark it and say it's for podcasts specifically. So again, there are all kinds of software. A lot of the audio podcasting hosts will actually have an ability to upload your audio to YouTube and other places with a static image. There's been a lot of discussion about how useful that is. And that's probably a larger subject, because depending on whether people are actually watching it or whether it's just open in a tab somewhere in the background that they're listening to while they work on other things, that may or may not matter. And again, I guess, we have certainly seen a bit of a trend towards shorter form content anyway. So I don't want to make any predictions about, our attention spans and how long or short they may be. But, I guess the thing I would say is there are audiences for both. And the thing I appreciate about audio podcasts is that I can listen to them while I'm multitasking and I'm moving around and I'm not attached to the computer. So, I mean, those are some of the benefits. And again, as I said at the top of the show, I'm certainly not against podcasts. I love podcasts. I listen to 3 or 4 hours every single day. I can't get enough podcasts. So I guess that's the other thing. If any of you actually are podcasters, let me know in the chat what your show's called and where I can find it, because I'm always looking for new things to listen to.
Yeah. I think that is an important point to make, though. Like, if you are doing a podcast as a live stream, keep in mind that you stay true to being a podcast, because it is those audio only listeners at the end of the day that you're probably making content for. So you don't want to do anything that relies heavily on visual aspects, and that's just based on what your content is. And just make sure you're being verbose in your visualizations if you need to
Well,
actually do
I
something.
mean, verbose is probably not the word I would use. Like, just
Sure.
explicit. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's such a trap for so many of us to say click here, click here, click here, when what we should be
Exactly.
saying is
Right.
click on the file menu, go to settings,
Yeah.
go to the video options, and update the resolution. So you actually using your
Yes.
words and articulating what you're trying to communicate is
Yeah.
really really important. But again, and to be honest, I totally have ambitions to start my own audio only podcast. That is something I'm sort of leaning towards. And I love the idea of not having the lights on, not really caring what I look like,
Right.
and just talking into the microphone and editing in a different way. So they are different experiences for the creator as
Yes.
much as the consumer. So, but again, my thing is that if you do have expertise, it's probably not a huge ask to express those two different ways at two different
Mhm.
times. So, if as I always say, if something is worth saying, it's probably worth saying more than once, and it's probably worth
Yes.
committing to different types of content. So, those are all really useful things to keep in mind, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're, again, always focus on whatever the main thing is. So if it is a podcast and you start to do a live stream of it, like, look back on it and be like, is this worth doing this way? Does this need to be its own thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the video and live streaming show. I'm John Lacey, and I'm being joined, as always, by Sam Proof. Today, we've been talking about audio or video opportunities for audio podcasts. So, given everything that we've said today, if somebody did have an audio podcast, they were thinking about what kind of opportunity they'd like to explore next. Do you have any thoughts on how they might choose from the array of options that are actually out there for us?
Come back and corner us and be like, this is what I'm doing. What should I do with it? I think that's the advice. Yeah, there's just so many things out there. Yeah. Narrow down what your goals are, and then we can break it down from there. Is basically what I say. I also kind of got caught up reading Zeta's very long message there, so I got distracted
Yes.
real quick.
All right. Well, we'll come back to that in a second, and I won't.
Yeah.
I won't attempt to put Zeta's entire message on the screen because I know it won't fit. But essentially, Zeta, who is watching on LinkedIn, is saying that she's got two podcasts. Ritual recipes, where I share recipes for weddings, funerals, etc., and
Interesting.
My Spouse Has Dementia, where I share stories and info to help family dementia carers survive. And you can find out more about those at virtualrecipes.net and myspouseHasDementia.com. And she's noting too that she has been putting the dementia podcast on YouTube. So that's it's good to see that people are sort of exploring these things. I guess, and this, we'll come. In fact, we'll come back to the next steps because I do have some things I want to say about that. But the thing about multicasting, which is another thing we've spoken about in recent weeks, and podcasting, is that there are lots of places where people can enjoy your content.
Yes.
And in some ways that's awesome, but some ways that's kind of confusing. And one of the questions that I hear pop up quite a bit on various places about podcasting is, if I want to share my show, where do I send people? Because some people will send the Apple podcasts, or as I call it, iTunes, because I'm of a certain age and it's still called that on Windows. But essentially, where do you want to send them to give them the option? And I think that's a place where it's often really useful to have your own website and actually give people the options once they get there. But again, think about where your audience might be congregating, and think about what are the opportunities there, because as Sam sort of mentioned earlier, different platforms have different personalities and different sensibilities. And
Yeah.
if you are doing funny memes, you should definitely be on TikTok. They will love you there.
Right. Yeah.
If you're doing more serious stuff, maybe you might get some traction there. Maybe it's better on YouTube.
Yeah.
Those are certainly worth considering. So, yeah, I guess having a home base and maybe prioritizing a few places. And again, like we share this show in a number of different places, but I'm most focused on YouTube and LinkedIn. I know Sam does a lot on Twitch and
Yep.
YouTube, but it does go to other places. And it's not bad to have a presence in other places, but try to make it obvious to your audience where they'll get the best experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you should have a knowledge of what is your best platform, like what you want people to go to, and just keep checking back on it and make sure that the data proves you are correct. Because
Hmm.
I've been in that situation where with the kitten cam, we were broadcasting everywhere, and I was like, D Live is our thing now because Mixer went away. But surely and slowly, Twitch just like outpaced it, and I was like, well, we need to pay more attention to this and figure it out and see what else we need to do on here and build out the profile and the channel and do all that stuff because that's where the people suddenly are. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. So let's head back to our next steps, and I guess we've given you a lot of ideas to think about today. And again, it's not my intention to overwhelm anybody. So if there was one that was particularly of interest to you, I would encourage you to maybe explore it a little bit. But don't rush out and spend $10,000 on a studio setup unless you
Oh,
really have cash to burn.
yeah.
Think about the things that you've already got access to, and especially with the streaming software, things like Restream, things like StreamYard, they both have sort of free options to start with. And I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. You really want to think about. You really want to try some of these things out first to see if they're going to
Yeah.
work for you. If you do it and you absolutely hate it and you have no intention of ever doing it again, you kind of want to know that before you've spent money. Um, but again, like it could be just making a short little clip and sharing that on TikTok or YouTube. There would be sorry, I'm slightly distracted by Joe's comment. I'm just going to read it
Yeah.
out. I'm
Yeah.
not entirely sure what
I
it
had a
means.
feeling. No,
So
I get
Joe
it.
Joe writes, funny names on TikTok. Sam would be great as the pizza proofer, which is a bit of
Sure.
pun for you. Again,
Yeah.
if you don't know,
Thank you.
pizzas are very, very important to Sam. They're actually fairly
It's
important to
true.
me.
Very good.
I live in this sad little low carb existence, so I have slightly different pizzas with low GI wraps, and I've actually made one before this show because it'll be lunchtime by the time we finish, so I'm going to eat it cold. But we do love pizza between the two of us, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've actually just renewed my interest in making pizza videos, so you'll be seeing more of that. Yeah, we'll get into that another time. I don't want to go promoting stuff like right now.
Sure. All right, so this is the video and live streaming show. Thank you for joining us. If you are joining us live or if you're watching this later on, we appreciate it. Again, if you want to join us more frequently, we're on all kinds of various places. I guess I wasn't going to do this till later, Sam, but let's do it right now. So where can people find out more about you and watch your content and all those good things?
Sure. Yeah, with the exception of TikTok, where I am official Sam Proof, I am Sam Proof on every platform you could want, but you can find all of my links on samproof.tv. Yeah, hit me up if you can't find it.
And if you want to catch up with anything I'm doing, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I've got all the links to all of the places, and it's sort of learn live streaming on YouTube. And you can find me. I've got a whole bunch of social links down the bottom of the page there. So it has been great having so much discussion in the chat. We do apologize. We have had some technical issues, but yeah, it has been great to talk to you about this. And again, we don't want to tell you you have to do a billion things, but if there is something that you're interested in exploring, start slowly and gently. And again,
Yeah.
if you need to, try it with some supportive friends, maybe not out to the entire world, just to get some feedback, just to see how
Oh,
it
yeah.
works. By all means, just that is perfectly fine, and I would sort of encourage that approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in this day and age, all you need is a phone. Like, you can do what you want. Like, there's a few really cheap accessories you can get to turn your phone into like a small podcasting system. That's good enough. Like, literally, this lav that I grabbed last minute because everything else broke is like a $20. This is it. It's 2 lavs. You plug it right into your phone and it just have like a 2-person podcast immediately. Um, you know, you don't even have to be in the same room. You can do a Zoom thing and turn that into a podcast. If you're watching this stream, you're able to make a podcast. You have the tech
Yes.
you need.
Yes. So, and along those lines, actually, next week on the show, we are talking about starting Scrappy. So, actually, utilizing some free or cheap tools, things that you already
Yeah.
have. We've alluded to some of them already, but again, I sometimes think sometimes people are inclined to say, I'll get started after I buy the $700 microphone
Right.
and the $2,000 lights. And there are all kinds of reasons why that's a bad idea, and we'll certainly explore those next week. So,
Yeah.
again, we'll be going out to all the various places, so feel free to subscribe wherever you're watching. And again, we'd love to have your company then. Have a great weekend. Thanks, Joe, and Zeta in the chat, thanking us for the event. It's so great to have your company today. So, take care. We'll talk to you again, sort of the same time next week. And
Yep.
any final thoughts, Sam?
Start streaming, start podcasting. You do it now.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon. It's been great.
Bye, everyone.